All right, so thanks everyone for coming in today. The focus is just going over some of the results that we have obtained from our stormwater message testing survey. Um, I'm going to share screen now. If you can't see my screen, please let me know. But basically today we'll be going over the results of our little experiment that we did here to try to better understand what different types of messages, slogans, and design characteristics of stormwater materials may influence people's knowledge about stormwater, their behavioral intentions, and sort of other key characteristics that we might be looking for out of a stormwater education campaign. After I go through the results, we can have a group discussion, see if there are any questions or thoughts or things that you would, additional analyses or results that you would like to see that maybe I haven't put together. And then we'll conclude with thinking about the next steps. And so for the next steps, we're going to be actually launching a campaign and doing mail outs to about 20,000 people throughout the Tampa Bay watershed. So we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content and design of those campaign materials in light of the results that I show you today. So just as a quick recap, I think everyone hopefully had a chance to look at the survey whenever it was getting created and got a lot of feedback from folks and adopted them based on the feedback. But basically, we get to start out with some general different demographic information. We then ask them about various stormwater related behaviors that they have done in the past. The key point of this really being we wanted to see if we could identify characteristics of residents that help predict who is engaged in different stormwater related behaviors, both good and bad. We then asked them some questions about their stormwater beliefs or their stormwater knowledge based off of things that we heard in the focus groups and things that y'all thought were important to sort of gauge and that you might want to help influence with our messages. So here we're really wanting to also understand if there are any characteristics of the population that can predict who holds these beliefs. Then after that, we present them with our stormwater material and we do it in an experimental approach. And so I'll go over that in just a second. But after we've exposed them to the stormwater material, we then ask them some questions to check their ability to recall the messages, content, and things like that in those stormwater materials because we want to see if any of those materials actually differ according to how memorable they are or how people interpret the purpose or actions within those materials. We then have follow-up questions that then go reference back to those stormwater related behaviors that we asked them previously. And now, after they've been exposed, we want to know what their intentions to engage in those behaviors in the future might be to see if any of our stormwater materials actually influence people's intentions to engage in those behaviors in the future. We asked them again the same exact stormwater belief or knowledge questions that we asked earlier. Here we want to see if those stormwater materials actually increased people's stormwater knowledge after the fact. We then have a couple different sort of ways to gauge other indicators of behavior change. And so one of them is what we call commitments or pledges. So we ask them if they'd be willing to sign a stormwater pledge to commit to keeping our waterways clean. And so there, we also want to know if the stormwater materials influence their commitment to being stormwater friendly. We then also ask them a bunch of various questions about the materials themselves or different design characteristics and things like that, just to see if there's any differences. And then finally, we have a second little indicator of potential behavior change. And this is where we actually ask them if they have any comments or suggestions for environmental practitioners and our government officials working in stormwater in terms of messages that they think would be really effective or slogans for future stormwater campaigns. And so this is really to see if any of our stormwater materials actually influence their willingness to provide support to people like yourselves. And so in terms of the presentation of the materials, we really wanted to emulate the sort of marketing landscape in a real world scenario. If we just set people down in front of the stormwater material, they'd probably spend too much time analyzing it. They'd know that this is a study about stormwater material. If they want good feedback from me, I need to pay a lot of attention. But in the real world, people aren't like that. We're inundated with marketing materials everywhere on the streets, in our mail, etc. And so we wanted to situate the stormwater material next to what I'm called decoy messages, all of them around the theme of the environment. But we've got one that's just about choosing organic produce at the grocery store. And then another one is about choosing more vegetarian friendly options or at least avoiding beef altogether. And so we presented them in this order here because we do know that typically people have a better memory of things that they see first or things that they see last. And so we intentionally wanted to disadvantage our stormwater material by sandwiching it in the middle because we wanted to see, in the muck of the noise around us, at the worst case scenario, at the biggest disadvantage, how memorable is the stormwater material to these residents? And then after we showed those to them, we asked them a bunch of the memory recall questions. And to make sure that they weren't just copying, pasting what they see, we blurred out the images. But as long as someone's paying attention, based off the blurred image, you can sort of remember generally which advertisement we're actually talking about without seeing any of the content directly. And if you recall, we had different versions of the stormwater materials. So here I'm just going to show you the materials that we did use. We have this one that I call the control. So this is using the only rain down the drain slogan. And really the focus here is an ecological type of message, and it's just showing the source. So it's just showing water going down the drain. We then update that. Everything else is the same, except we now include here an image of the sink, so where that stormwater actually ends up. And so because they're identical except for that image, then any observed differences that we see between them, we can infer due to just the image of the outcome itself. Similarly, taking that image and then just tweaking it now, it's exactly the same, except now we've added a norm-based message. So we're trying to establish this norm here that, hey, the majority of Tampa Bay homeowners know that they shouldn't be blowing leaves into the street. So we're trying to activate some kind of norm in the community to see if that might have more of an influence in trying to convince people to avoid blowing leaves or grass clippings into the street. Again, if we compare these two directly, then any observed difference should just be the difference due to the effect of the ecological message versus the norm-based message. Here, now we introduce the slogan that was more memorable and more popular according to our focus groups, the Don't Feed the Beast. And so again, compared to the previous one, exactly the same message, but now it's really just the difference is going from only rain down the drain to Don't Feed the Beast with our little drain monster here, courtesy of Pinellas County. And then our last one, slightly more controversial, but we were interested in this based off of the focus group responses saying most people didn't know that it was illegal in some cities to blow grass clippings in the street. So this last one changes that norm-based message to more of a legal message or a financial consequence type of message. So any difference that we see between these two Don't Feed the Beast ones is probably due just to the use of those different messages. Now we can also compare across multiple messages. So if we want to look at the control one versus the Don't Feed the Beast legal message, we can still do that. But because there's so many differences between the two, we can't actually identify exactly what it is that's causing the difference here. This is reflective of what we would call compounded or interaction effects. So going into the results, I'm just going to start off here with the results from our ratings of different material characteristics. I'm just going to go through them quickly because there's not too much to talk about at this stage. I will go in deeper to them with more qualitative analyses and looking for patterns and things like that. So this is really just, I'm just going to breeze through these. But basically here you can see sort of across the board for all of our different stormwater materials. They're all listed here on the side as well. Difference is in ratings in terms of how attention grabbing it was, how attractive it was, memorability, the clarity of the message, and if it provoked any negative emotions to them. We don't see any statistically significant differences between our stormwater materials across all of these. That's not particularly surprising because if you look at all of them together, they're all very identical, right? There's very few things that actually change between them. So unless there was some, major influence of the slogan or an image or a message, we wouldn't really expect to see too much variation in terms of design characteristics between all of them. We also asked them about their some personal interests, so how relevant it was to the things that they care about, if they actually care about this issue, their desire to read it, if they got it in the mail, their desire to learn more after reading it, and their desire to share it with other people. All of these are above a measure of 3, which is, generally sort of positive ratings to these. And then the last thing that we asked was if they learned something from it and if they thought it would convince people to change their behaviors. And this sort of convincing one has kind of the lowest ratings across the board. So people think, yeah, they're relatively attractive, but they may not be particularly convincing to folks. So that's just a summary of the characteristics that we have in there. Again, I'll be diving deeper into those in the next couple of months uh, with more analyses. But if we look at the material recall, again, a lot of this is going to need qualitative analyses for those open-ended questions that we gave to them. But I'll just summarize sort of the big takeaways from them. And so the first question was we asked them if they could remember what the topic was of this material when it was blurred to them. And here you can see the differences between our stormwater messages and the 2 decoys that we had. As we expected, the material that we gave them first and the material that we gave them last generally are more memorable to people. They were more apt to be able to recall what the general topic was of those materials as compared to the stormwater message. But even with that disadvantage, sandwiching our stormwater material in the middle, we did have about 60% of people that were able to remember what that topic was about. So that's generally good. As long as it's more than half, we'll be happy with that. And we also asked about the slogan. And so we asked them if they could remember the slogan and what it was, if they could remember it. And there was such a large variety of responses to this question that I actually created this little recall quality index. So if it's a 0, that's people that didn't remember the slogan at all. If it's a 1, they didn't remember the slogan, but they remembered some kind of phrase from the advertisement. So maybe they said, keep our waterway clean, right? So that's not the slogan, but we do say keep our waterways clean in there. So they get a 1 for the recallability. They remembered something. A 2 is where they have almost the right slogan. So they're very close. It's just a little tweak. So if they just said rain in the drain, or they said feed the beast, or something like that, where they're almost there, but it's not quite what we wanted. And then 3 is perfect recall. So they exactly said only rain down the drain or don't feed the beast. And if we look at these perfect recall folks, we see that the people who got the Don't Feed the Beast slogan were significantly more likely to be able to remember the exact slogan than the people who got Only Rain Down the Drain as their slogan. And that is significant in terms of the probability of being able to recall it. So about 25% of people that get Don't Feed the Beast are likely to remember that slogan, whereas just about 15% of people are likely to remember the Only Rain Down the Drain. And if we look at differences between the actual materials itself, basically overall, we do see a significant difference across the board. But really, the main difference here is due to our control one. So this one where it only has the image of the storm drain. It had such a low probability of people being able to recall that slogan that it dragged everything down. But even these other two here, you can still see that they're generally lower than Don't Feed the Beast. So you can come away with this at least knowing that in general, Don't Feed the Beast is more salient to folks. They have a better memory of it, but also probably a lot has to do with how interesting the overall image is. And so kind of the least interesting one here where it's just the drain may also disadvantage the memory of the actual slogan. Now let's get into those stormwater beliefs that folks have. So here, if we look at their beliefs prior to exposure, so what is it that they came in with? And so I phrase these in terms of the answers that we are particularly interested in, the beliefs that we are particularly interested in. So we had one question based off of feedback that I got from you guys regarding the focus groups in terms of most people thinking that stormwater pollution is the government's responsibility, right? So they're putting the onus on the government. And a lot of folks said that we really want to encourage stewardship, right? We really want people to recognize it's all of us, it's the community, it's people like me that are also very responsible for keeping our waterways pollution free. And so, in terms of the percentages of people that believe that the government is not primarily responsible for keeping our waterways pollution free, it's about 1/3 of folks. So most people think the government is primarily responsible for this. We also had this question. It was phrased in the opposite way here, but basically their knowledge that plant debris is actually not helpful for improving water quality in our waterways. Actually, quite a good amount of people, about 60% of people, know this information before they took the survey, which was great. On the other hand, in terms of knowing that the best time to fertilize your lawn is when the chance of rain is very low, only about half of our residents were aware of that. And then their knowledge of, most stormwater does not flow to a treatment facility before being released. Again, only about 50% of residents know that. And we didn't see any significant differences between the groups, which is a good thing. This is prior to exposure, so we actually wanted people to be as similar as possible to one another. And now, can we actually predict who holds these beliefs? Well, really, the key things here is education and age. So, kind of across the board, people are more knowledgeable about stormwater if they are older, particularly seniors, so 55 and up. But also sort of millennials and up are more likely to believe that the government is not primarily responsible for these. We do also see some slight educational differences. So people with less formal education are more likely to put the onus on non-government entities, whereas people with more formal education are more likely to know that most stormwater doesn't go directly to a treatment facility. And interestingly here, hopefully a sign that our messages are working, at least regarding fertilizer campaigns, beef Floridian, et cetera. Long-term residents, so people who have lived here for 10 years or more, were more likely to know that you shouldn't fertilize your lawn when the chance of rain is high. And now, what about after exposure? So after they were presented with these materials, they were given the same questions again. And this is basically the change that we saw afterwards. Overall, all of the materials that you see here significantly increased the number of people that that changed their mind and said that the government is not primarily responsible for keeping waterways pollution free. So regardless of the material that they got, all of them significantly increased the number of people that came away with more of the sense of, personal ownership and responsibility. In terms of plant debris and their knowledge there, really some of the key ones that we saw was the sort of legal framed message with "Don't feed the beast," as well as our norm-based message of "Only rain down the drain." In terms of increasing their knowledge of when you should be fertilizing, the best one here was actually this sync message that has an ecologically framed message. And so that one may be the reason why it may have the highest increase is probably because it has this ecological message, unlike many of the others, but it also shows the outcome, right? So it shows where this is ending up. And so maybe that makes it, more salient to folks that what I put on my lawn actually is going to get washed away and end up in our water bodies. Interestingly, most of these materials did not actually increase people's knowledge about the treatment or untreatment of stormwater. So that was a bit surprising. I thought we would see more of a change by adding in the actual stormwater outflow image. But overall, we do see a small significant influence of this sort of norm-based message, but kind of across the board, we don't really see much change in people's beliefs about treatment facility processing of stormwater. In terms of, so we throw all of that into this big fancy model to see what really comes out as significant. And in terms of the responsibility level, we do again see actually that compared to all of the other messages, especially these two right here, the control image where we only see the drain actually has the biggest likelihood of getting people to think that the government is not primarily responsible compared to the other ones, especially compared to our "Don't feed the beast" messages. And so this was interesting to me. I was trying to think, I figured showing people the outflow, where this water goes would help emphasize personal responsibility. But I'm wondering if the reason for this may be because this source image, it really just focuses on at the local level, at the individual community level. Whereas once you add this outflow, now you're here seeing like, oh, this is going through government infrastructure, it's going into a common pool resource. And so maybe it really is the government's responsibility to actually be taking care of this and make sure the stuff that comes from our communities and goes to our public waterways is taken care of. Again, that's just my hypothesis looking at these results. If any other folks have ideas or thoughts on that, please feel free to share them with me. We don't see any difference across the materials in terms of their likelihood of knowing that plant debris is not helpful for water quality. We do see that difference that I showed earlier, this, image showing the outflow with an ecological message, does get people more likely to know when the best time to fertilize is compared to just showing the image of the stormwater drain. And it also does better than if you replace that ecological message with a norm-based message. And again, regarding stormwater treatment, no significant differences. They're all people in general are very unlikely to know that stormwater does not flow to a treatment facility before being released. Now let's get into some stormwater behaviors. So before being exposed to our messages, here's sort of a breakdown of the general frequency that people say that they engage in different behaviors of interest to us. So here we have the distribution of people saying, the frequency that they pick up trash that they see on the street or in public areas. Kind of not surprising, up here at this level 4, that's really sort of, I do it all the time. Every time I'm outside, I'm picking up trash that I see, and 0 is never. So it never happens. And so we have a nice sort of kind of even distribution here for that. In terms of recycling, we tend to see more people are doing it very frequently. Picking up their outdoor poop, this is quite good. So of the people who are dog owners, the vast majority of them say that they do it all of the time. This one is probably more influenced by social desirability, wanting to fit in. So how many of them are actually being honest about that? I'm not sure, but it's nice that they at least know that they shouldn't be doing that. We asked them about how often they blow vegetative debris onto the street when mowing or doing yard work. Again, most people are generally say that they don't usually do this whenever they're personally responsible for the landscaping in their property. If somebody else is responsible for the landscaping on their property, we ask them how often they think that person does these behaviors. And so this one was a bit higher. So people generally tend to think that their landscaper, whoever it may be, does this more frequently than the people who actually manage their lawn themselves. How often they add fertilizer to their lawn in the summer. This one's a little disappointing. It's relatively high for most of our landscapers themselves. Similar result for people, what they expect that their landscaper does. And then we also had this one about watering your lawn with a hose instead of a sprinkler. This one is kind of like a wild card one for me. I think it's a relatively big ask for folks, and for some people, it's certainly not a very more manageable one. And you can have sprinkler systems that actually are very stormwater friendly, as long as you know how much to do it and when to do it. But in general, here you can see a big difference between the people who landscape themselves versus what they think other people do. And so if we look at the people who are doing the desired stormwater behavior, so these are people who are always doing the things that we want, or the people who say that they are never doing the things that we don't want. Here's kind of the spread. Generally, probably not surprising, we see very few people that say they always pick up trash that they see on the street or in public areas. We see a decent amount of people that say they always recycle their used plastic products. Again, here, more than 50%, closer to 60% of people, dog owners, say that they always pick up their dog's outdoor poop. Of the people who landscape their own homes, about 40% say that they never blow vegetative debris onto the street. A little over 25% say that they never add fertilizer in the summer. That is a little concerning. And then again, few people say that they always water their lawn with a hose instead of a sprinkler system. That may be a product of how big their yard is, the type of yard that they have, etc. And you can see sort of general agreement with folks that aren't responsible for landscaping here. So, what characteristics are associated with these behaviors? If we wanted to be able to identify who the people are that are always doing the things that we want, what do they look like? How might you find them? Well, interestingly, the people that are always picking up trash in the street or in public areas, they actually have less knowledge about the harmful effects of debris, which I think is very interesting. But there are also people who have lived here for longer, so people who have actually lived in the region for more than 20 years. The people who say that they always recycle, they have more debris knowledge, so they know that debris is harmful for water quality. They're typically older, 65 and up. They're more educated with a graduate degree, and also Hillsborough residents are much more likely to say that they always recycle their plastic products. Those who pick up their outdoor poop, again, they have better knowledge about the harmful effects of debris, and they are generally seniors. The people who are never blowing vegetative debris into the street, again, more debris knowledge. They also are more knowledgeable about the lack of treatment of stormwater. These ones, they are also older, but it's generally millennials and up. So really the key folks that don't qualify here is sort of Gen Z, but also they have less formal education. This may be a product of people with more education, having higher incomes, having bigger yards, having higher HOA fees, and those sorts of things. That's kind of how I look at that potential reasoning for the education issue there. People who are never fertilizing in the summer, generally they place less responsibility of stormwater pollution on the government, so they are more kind of stewardship minded. They are, again, have less education, but also Pinellas County residents are much more likely to say that they never fertilize during the summer. And we had there was nothing that could really predict people that sort of say they always water their lawn with a hose or sprinkler system, at least with the characteristics that we had included in our survey. And now, after the fact, so after we've exposed them to our messaging, we asked them for all of those behaviors that we saw earlier, how likely they are to do it the next time that they are in that situation. So the next time they're in public, how likely are they to pick up the trash that they see in the area? And most people are saying that they're generally somewhat likely or likely to do that. The next time that they use plastic, how likely they are to recycle it, again, very high. To pick up their outdoor poop, very high. How likely are they to avoid blowing vegetative debris? We generally sort of see people are quite high, but there is a bigger spread. I'll get into these other folks in a second. In terms of not fertilizing their lawn in the summer, still kind of a mixed bunch. They err more on the side of not wanting to do it. But there's a decent amount of people that say that they're probably going to still do it anyway. And then watering their lawn had the biggest sort of spread. Again, it's kind of the more of the wild card one. In terms of the people who are not responsible for their landscaping, the behavior we actually ask them is how likely are you to ask your landscaper to not blow vegetative debris into the street, to not fertilize in the summer, those sorts of things. And so we can generally see more of a spread, people being generally less likely to want to ask their landscaper to do any of these behaviors. Especially their fertilizer use and how they water their lawn. So what we did in terms of modeling to identify any differences between folks is we separated people who said that they were more unlikely to do the behavior of interest, likely versus likely, and then we have kind of these uncertain folks. They were like, oh yeah, kind of likely, kind of unlikely. They're kind of on the fence. And so we wanted to see basically of the residents who did not engage in the desired behaviors that we want to see from them from the prior behaviors, we wanted to see how many of them actually changed their answer to say that now they're likely to adopt the desired behavior. So generally what we can see, those people who don't always pick up trash, we see about 40% of them across the board say that they're likely or very likely to do it. Plastic products was a popular one for people to sort of change their ways. Picking up outdoor poop was another one that was quite high in general, percent change of people. Vegetative debris was slightly less popular. It is interesting, though, if you kind of look across the board, the one that does deviate the most is the one that has the legal message. So of the people who previously have been blowing their leaves into the street, the one that gets people most likely to say they're not going to do it again is that legal message. But just to say, none of these are statistically significant. So there's no actual significant difference, or the difference between them is so small that we can't pick it up with the sample size that we have. Uh, Interestingly, of the people who say that they fertilize their lawn in some frequency during the summer, very few of them said that they were likely to change or that they would plan to not fertilize in the summer. So that's kind of a more difficult one for us when we think about identifying those barriers to change and why it is that they want to continue doing that. And then, watering their lawn, again, is kind of a mid-level response. So, if none of those materials are actually really driving the difference between who says they're more likely to do one behavior over another, what are the other characteristics that we might be able to identify to say, okay, these folks are more likely to change their behavior after they see any stormwater material or message at all? And across the board, we see some very consistent results. So for almost all of these behaviors, the people that were able to remember what stormwater material they got, they were always more likely to engage in the desired behavior. So that tells us that as long as people are paying attention, any kind of stormwater message or material is more likely to increase their intentions to engage in stormwater friendly behaviors. So that's quite good that we at least see an overall effect of this ability to recall the stormwater message. And then, unsurprisingly, if people engaged in a behavior more frequently in the past, they again said that they were going to do it again, or vice versa. So that goes kind of across the board. Where we do see some slight deviations, but also commonalities, the people who said they're more likely to not blow debris into the street or to avoid fertilizer in the future, are more knowledgeable that plant debris can be harmful for water quality. Other ones, so the people that say they're more likely to pick up trash and that they're more likely to avoid fertilizer in the summer are the people that do not believe that the government is primarily responsible for our waterways. So again, these are the people that place more onus or responsibility on everybody, on the community, on themselves. It's really this stewardship quality that is predicting their likelihood of avoiding fertilizer and picking up trash that they see. Also, some demographic characteristics. Women are generally more likely to say that they're going to recycle more and that they're going to avoid blowing vegetative debris in the street. And then there's some other just unique ones to them. So older folks, particularly older than 24, are more likely to say they're not going to blow debris in the street. People that have lived in their county for 5 to 9 years are more likely to say that they're going to pick up their dog's poop. And interestingly, the people that are more likely to pick up trash also tend to be incorrect about stormwater treatment. So that's an interesting outcome. Not entirely sure what to make of that. But yeah, so those are some of the characteristics. We did also ask this of the people who aren't responsible for their landscaping, so these other folks. And again, these requests are, for them to ask their landscaper to do the desired behavior. And what we saw is that the people that were shown the legal message here were more likely to say that they would ask their landscaper not to blow leaves or debris in the street. The people that got this image here with the sink and the ecological message were more likely to ask their landscaper to not fertilize in the summer. Interestingly, the norm-based message here had the opposite effect. So people that saw this norm-based message were less likely to ask their landscaper to avoid the fertilizer. A potential reason for that may be if we kind of activated a norm here, maybe they don't see the need. They don't see it as important because they think, oh, most people don't do that anyway. So why do I need to ask? They probably know that. They probably know they're not supposed to be doing it. That's just a hypothesis anyway, based off of that result. Other things, again, the people that could remember the stormwater material that they saw, they're more likely to do it. We also see a few different things. So again, that kind of stewardship, individual responsibility made them more likely to ask their landscapers not to blow debris. The people that were more likely to ask to their landscaper to avoid fertilizer if they believe that they rarely do it in the past as well. And kind of same thing here. It's just consistent materials. And then we also have, some other demographics here for women and millennials and older being more likely to use a hose on our lawn instead. And then critically, we did also distinguish between people who aren't responsible for the landscape in terms of who is responsible. So it can either be someone in their own home that is doing it, it can be an HOA, or it can be some other landscaping company or contractor. And across the board, we find that people are more likely to ask their landscaper to do these stormwater friendly behaviors. if that person is within their own house. So if it's their spouse, their parent, their sibling, etc., which probably isn't surprising. Any time you have to go and ask an HOA or your contractor, someone outside of your home, you're going to be less likely to ask them to do that particular behavior. And then our last results are our behavior requests that we had from them. So we did ask them, if they'd be willing to sign the Stormwater Pledge. Most people said that they were willing to do that. A little over 60% said in general that they were willing to take the Stormwater Pledge, and we did not see any difference in terms of the different type of material that they had. So we thought, okay, if the material isn't influencing their likelihood of signing the pledge, what is? And so we generally see that people are more likely to agree to sign the Stormwater Pledge if they said that they were more likely to pick up trash in the future or to recycle in the future. We also saw that millennials in particular were more likely to be willing to sign the pledge than older or younger folks. And we do see a small effect here where people who have a graduate degree are less likely to want to sign the pledge. And who knows what that reason is, maybe privacy concerns or who knows what. And then for the people who aren't responsible for their landscaping, sort of similar things, if they were more likely to pick up trash in the future, they were more willing to sign the pledge. If they were more willing to use a hose instead of a sprinkler, they were more likely to sign the pledge. And interestingly, Hillsborough County residents were more likely to be willing to sign the pledge than residents of Pasco County as well. Now, this other behavior indicator that we had here, so them submitting recommendations for stormwater messaging. In general, only about 1/4 of respondents overall gave us some actual messages or ideas or recommendations for slogans and things like that. So I read through all of them and kind of, scored them, if they actually gave us something that was useful or that actually required thought. Again, we generally don't see too much of a difference between them, but where we do see a difference is between these two right here. And so that's this norm-based message that uses only rain down the drain and then don't feed the beast. So really this effect here is just due to the logo. So only rain down the drain versus don't feed the beast. We don't really have any ways of explaining that at the moment. My hypothesis might be that since Don't Feed the Beast and the Drain Monster is a bit more creative, perhaps that made people feel like they had less recommendations to offer. Maybe they thought it was more creative, so they don't have any more recommendations to give. They're happy with it versus only rain down the drain. Maybe they thought it was a bit, dull or something like that. And so maybe they had more recommendations to offer for that. But that's just, again, another hypothesis for what might be contributing to the importance of the slogan for those recommendations. In terms of other reasons why people would be more likely to give us those recommendations, if they were willing to take the Stormwater Pledge, they were also more likely to give us recommendations. But also interestingly, if they were more likely to avoid fertilizing this summer, they were more likely to give us recommendations as well. That's for people that were responsible for landscaping. For those that are not responsible, again, the Stormwater Pledge is also influential. If they know that plant debris is harmful for water quality, they were also slightly more likely to give us recommendations, but age was really the key thing here in terms of recommendations. And so generally older folks were more willing to give us recommendations, to take the time to go out of their way to actually give us that feedback. So that's a lot of stuff. If it sounds like a lot to you, it's also a lot to me to do all of it. And there's also it's also not all of the results. So for those of you like me who are hearing loud circus music at the end of this, I'll just briefly summarize what our findings are. So Do stormwater materials increase stormwater knowledge? Yes. So all of these stormwater materials that we have increased residents' belief that the government is not primarily responsible for keeping our waterways pollution free. And this was the strongest in the control message, the only one that didn't show where the stormwater actually ends up. Increases in fertilizer knowledge were greatest for the only rain down the drain sink material compared to the control group. So that's the effect of adding that outflow imagery where the stormwater goes. But we also saw increased fertilizer knowledge when we looked at ecological messages over norm-based messages. Otherwise, there's no real strong evidence here that any of the materials significantly increased their knowledge about the effects of plant debris on water quality or the treatment or untreatment of stormwater before it was released. What predicts their prior beliefs about stormwater? It's really just key demographic information. Age is the most important, with older folks generally being more knowledgeable about stormwater overall. We did see some small effects of education. There's, some things we can get into the weeds here, but it's generally a small effect. Also, residents that have lived in their county for longer periods of time were also more likely to know the best time to apply fertilizer than new residents. Do stormwater materials influence behavioral intentions? Kind of, but only if they're really paying attention. So even though we didn't find any differences between the materials for most of our stormwater friendly behaviors, the intentions to engage in those stormwater friendly behaviors were always greater for those who could remember the stormwater material that they saw. So, the issue really here, any stormwater material is better than no stormwater material, but they have to be able to remember it. So it has to be catching. They have to, as long as they remember it, they're going to be more likely to engage, to at least say that they're more likely to engage in the things that we want them to. Other things tend to be important in here. So their prior engagement, what they've done in the past, that's the best predictor of what they're going to do in the future, especially over this very short time period. But also their beliefs about plant debris and who is responsible for keeping our waterways pollution free. There's also some gender and age influences in there as well. For those that aren't primarily responsible for landscaping on their property, they are less likely to ask their landscaper to adopt stormwater friendly practices if it's someone outside their household, especially if their HOA is responsible. How can we look for people that might be engaging in, good or bad stormwater related behaviors? Really, the key things are what they believe, their age, and where they are and how long they've been here. So overall, we've seen that stormwater friendly behaviors are associated with greater knowledge about the harmful effects of plant debris for water quality, and that's specifically linked to behaviors like recycling their plastic, picking up pet waste, and keeping grass clippings off the street. Mostly seniors, but sometimes millennials and older are generally more likely to be engaging in the behaviors that we want them to. Some other notable things, the differences between Hillsborough residents who are more likely to recycle and Pinellas residents that are less likely to fertilize in the summer, and long-term residents being more likely to pick up the trash that they see in their communities. And interestingly, those who avoid fertilizing in the summer place less responsibility on the government for keeping our waterways clean. And that was also a key predictor of fertilizer intentions after exposure. So that personal onus of responsibility is very important. So do stormwater materials influence commitment and support? Not really. We didn't see any differences in terms of their willingness to sign the stormwater pledge, and it didn't even matter if they could remember the material. So whether they remember what they saw or not, it didn't influence whether or not they were willing to sign the pledge. We did see that there was a small difference between norm-based materials with Don't Feed the Beast being slightly less likely to elicit recommendations from them. But overall, what's really influencing their likelihood to take those pledges is if they intend to pick up trash or recycle in the future, and if they are millennials or older. There's also a difference in Hillsborough versus Pasco residents. And in terms of recommendations, if they were willing to sign the pledge, they were also more likely to give us recommendations. And if they were older and planned to avoid fertilizing in the summer, they're more likely to offer us some support. And then here, we're still going to be doing a lot of work on this. Do the stormwater materials actually differ according to memorability and interpretations? We do generally see that the stormwater materials were less memorable, as we might expect from the decor ones. Um, but we didn't really see any difference in memorability between all five of the materials that we had. We did see that the Feed the Beast slogan was more memorable than only rain down the drain, but this was mostly due to the use of the only rain down the drain material in the control message, where it was just the image of the drain. So we only had, I think, about 9% of people remembered the slogan with that material. We'll be doing more stuff in the coming months. That's going to be more intricate and fine-tuned to get more at this. But generally, those are the things that we have found out from this survey effort thus far. So with all of that said, a lot of material. Hopefully that summary was helpful. But just wanted to open it up to the group now, just to sort of discuss these results. Have these planted any thoughts in your head, any questions or considerations? Just does anybody have any feedback that they'd like to share or thoughts on the stuff that I've shown you today?
I guess I'll come out first and say there's a lot of really great information. Really appreciate it. Lots of notes here with good stuff. I'm not surprised with the I guess you'd say older people being a little bit more responsive to things. I found with even our Adopt Upon program, a lot or actually a majority of the people who have signed on for that program are retirees. People are retired mainly because they have quote unquote more time on their hands. A lot of times we can't get younger people to join Adopt Upon because they don't have, again, I mean, everybody has time, but they state they don't have enough time to, clean up their pond, plant the plants, do the maintenance that's required. Um, so that definitely makes sense. And then just real quick with the Don't Feed the Beast logo, um, I know we said the people who had that one as their example had a harder time coming up with their own kind of slogan, which I wonder if that's because they maybe don't really know what Don't Feed the Beast means. I mean, that could just be a random thing, but it's like with the only rain down the drain, you kind of get a clear image of what that means. So it might be easier to come up with your own logo versus Don't Feed the Beast if they don't have a clear understanding of like, okay, what's the beast? What am I feeding? It may be more difficult for them to come up with something on their own. Those are just my random thoughts, trying to keep everything consolidated, all the information.
No, that's a really good point, Sarah. And it does get me at what we're going to be doing with our qualitative analyses because I've just shown the recall stuff from the open-ended questions, but we also ask them what was the point of the material that you saw? What action did it want you to take? And can you think of any other actions that you could take that would be supportive of what that material is asking of you? And so all of that is really where we get into interpretation stuff. So that's hopefully where we'll be able to identify if Don't Feed the Beast, if it is more ambiguous, that
Yeah.
is hopefully where we'll find that information. Like, are people really able to know what the purpose is of this slogan? Are they really able to identify clear behaviors and clear actions or clear consequences from that? So yeah, that is definitely something that is definitely a caveat here that, all of this stuff will could potentially change in terms of, the rationale behind it and all of that stuff once we dive into those open-ended responses for sure.
Awesome. Can't wait to hear.
Thanks, Sarah. Mila.
Hi, good morning. Um, Thanks for all the efforts. That's a lot of data analysis, and sounds like there's more to come. I just had a question. So, in your summary, and then also we talked a little bit about it before. The we intentionally sandwiched the stormwater material in between the two decoy materials because, we want to see how well they actually recall it. Um, but I'm wondering if because the two decoy materials, regardless of being sandwiched in the middle, if the two decoy materials are kind of similar because they're both related to food, in some way and might be, you know, I I don't I want to use the word attacking, but that's not, or targeting like different parts of the environmental brain. And because they're more similar, if maybe it's having an unintentional opposite effect where because they're both food, then they think it's about food. And so now they're thinking more about just in food and being more environmental in that context, where we were saying we don't want to make them think it's about stormwater because then they're going to give us answers that we want to hear. But do you think that it's possible maybe the opposite is happening because our decoy materials are similar?
That's definitely possible, and that's a good idea. They are both about food. They're sort of different in terms of the asks of them. One of them is about like, shopping at a grocery store. One of them is about actual consumption, and things like that. Um, but yeah, so it is possible that after seeing, two kind of food-based messages, then that, food becomes really salient to them. And so I think would have the same directional effect, but it would just be in greater magnitude. So it would just disadvantage the stormwater material even more. But so if that were the case, then I think approximately 60% recall of the stormwater material is actually quite good if that's, the increased magnitude of disadvantage that it has. I will also say that in terms of defining recall, if they just said food, for either one of them, I didn't count it as recall because I didn't know which thing that they were referencing. I would go on further though, so because some people just want to give one word answers, right? But if I went to other questions, if they had something really ambiguous like food or water for the stormwater one, I would go to the follow-up questions to see if they actually remembered it or if it's vague or if they confused, the beef one for the organic one, etc. So for them to be coded as actual recall, they do have to explicitly, be able to show that they're referencing the organic one versus the beef one, and stuff like that. But yeah, so I think that it is very possible that they could have, really sort of made the food kind of theme more salient to them for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions that these bring up for folks? Any other sort of additional information that you would want, knowing that we still have more stuff to do with this? Any questions that you would like to have answered in the future? Things that you're thinking about, good to know.
Hey Blake, I'd be interested in one or two more sayings besides only rain down the drain and don't feed the beast, but that's for future research, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's actually kind of like a good segue, I guess, to sort of the next discussion, which is, kind of, next we're going to be doing a big mail out campaign. And so we're going to be looking at both old residents and new residents as part of our the key audience for our stormwater grant proposal. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to compare two different types of materials, with the idea being that, we would design them with the insights that we've kind of gained from our focus groups as well as our surveys to really ground truth it in, a 20,000 person audience. So the goal here is to create two different materials that then we can track their engagement with. They'll have, some kind of request for them to go to a website or to take the pledge, etc. And then we'll be able to track those web analytics. So in terms of who is viewing this from the material we sent them, click rates, the time that they spent on the web page, and if we have any resources for them, the frequency that people are downloading those, to really sort of see, in practice, once we actually get these in people's mailboxes, do we actually see any differences between materials and or between people who are kind of, new versus long-term residents here. So really sort of the question that I would like to pose to all of you going forward is, what effect would you really like to test out of this? And so I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. These don't have to be the things that you guys want. It's just to get you to sort of thinking about it. So like, if we really wanted to say, oh, okay, a greater sense of community responsibility is something that's really important, and we really want to know if we're kind of championing this in the community, then the results that we have currently would suggest that focusing the image around the source, so keeping it local, very community focused, would be more likely to increase that sense of community responsibility. If you were interested in, increasing people's knowledge of the best time to apply fertilizer, then our results suggest the opposite. It suggests showing the sink, showing where our stormwater ends up. Or if you were interested in, people engaging in best landscaping practices, specifically of not blowing leaves or grass clippings into the street and not fertilizing in the summer, if that is really important to you, then the results that we have thus far would suggest that increasing their knowledge about the harmful effects of plant debris would be an important factor to contributing those best management practices. So now just want to turn it over to you guys and to open it up to you. What would you guys get most use out of from this? What would you really like to be able to say, oh, okay, we know that this is better at engaging people than this? Is that about different images that you want to use? Is it different slogans? Since we didn't see too much variation between only rain down the drain versus don't feed the beast, except in terms of memorability, we don't have to be stuck to those two slogans. If we want, we can have the same a new slogan on both of them. And it could be the same thing, and then the different thing that we change is the image or the message or the behavior. But yeah, so just want to open it up to you all. What would you really like to know out of this kind of mail-based experimental approach that we're going to do? Any thoughts, ideas?
I'm not sure how I would word this, but I guess I was most surprised about the amount of people who don't realize that, stormwater goes straight into a water body and isn't treated. I mean, obviously, I struggle with that a lot with adopt-a-pond folks and just trying to convince them to put plants in their pond, to have stormwater ponds kind of be a treatment area. But I, in like personal, haven't seen a lot of people who still believe that stormwater is treated. So I am surprised there's so many people out there who don't quite understand the I guess the flow of stormwater, as we say, as it goes from the sky to eventually the Gulf.
Yeah, I think it's surprising as well, and especially with the images that we saw, trying to explicitly create that link
Yeah.
between them. Showing, it's still out, the outflow, contains all of the trash and the debris that went in. But yeah, maybe it's just such a cemented idea that people have that it really, if we want to be able to get people to notice or to have that realization, it really needs to be probably the focus of it, and not just something that we expect them to sort of put the pieces together just through
Yeah.
passive viewing.
Yeah, I'm not sure best course of action there.
Blake, this is Heather Maggio with the City of Tampa.
Hey, Heather.
The challenge that I'm finding in educational aspects as far as treatment for stormwater is the fact that we do have several traditional stormwater ponds in the city, as well as HOA ponds that are privately owned. And we get complaints for pollution into those ponds. And so our challenge is to explain the difference between a natural water body and a stormwater pond and the useful benefits of building a pond, which is to put the pollution in there. And so that's what we're coming up with because we have built them so well that they look like natural water bodies. And so I do get at least 2 complaints a week on what are you going to do to protect my stormwater pond? So that's just a topic that may need a little bit of education on what is a natural water body, what is a man-made pond, and what is the purpose of that pond.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that's a good idea, Heather. We can think about that too. Yeah. Any other particular needs that folks have? Um, um, Also, just want to sort of emphasize that Alana has now put together a big inventory of different things. So if we did want to utilize some of the new slogans that are out there, sort of piggyback off of the designs of some of these or the particular behaviors that are targeted. Um, yeah, I don't know. Alana, if do you have, since you've been working on these for such a long time, do you have any uh slogans or materials in particular that you would be super keen to kind of see how they do out in the wild?
Honestly, no, and I don't want to speak for the practitioners on the ground. I want them to kind of guide what we're sending out since they're the ones who will have to be making these materials and educating their residents in the future. So, whatever you all think is useful. We just made these to give you some other options when it comes to education. But I did, I guess, just on a personal note, with the 3 options you gave us, I do like the first one and then the third one. And focusing on the community responsibility aspect, but not necessarily showing like at the end of pipe. And then the last, comparing that to the last one, which is going into a specific issue like landscaping and then showing what those harmful impacts are. Um, it just feels like those would be 2 good like contrasting issues.
Yep.
Hey, Blake.
Hey,
Brooke
Brooke.
with City of Largo. The community responsibility, I thought it was interesting how you would put the 66% of homeowners already do this. And that seemed to like sway people, like this is what I should be doing. So I think more of that community responsibility and just making people aware that, they can participate.
Yeah, great. Mila.
Hi, yeah, I was gonna say something similar about the community responsibility because it seems like there was a difference in how many people realized that the government is not responsible for doing these things, um, and that also the percent of people who don't do something and might do something in the future really only seem to want to change that behavior when it was something that affected them personally or maybe how they were viewed personally. So it might be interesting to look at community responsibility and sort of, just umbrella that and educate a little bit more on that because it can trickle down into a lot of these other more specific targeted behaviors we want to look at. I think maybe a caveat to that is you're not targeting any specific behaviors. as in like when to fertilize and when not to fertilize. You're focusing more on just the responsibility to, um, be accountable in general. Um, but I think perhaps if people understand that a little bit better, then some of those more specific behaviors might start to click more. I don't know. I guess to me, it seems a little bit more broad to focus on community responsibility. So I guess it just depends if like people want to look at specific issues or behaviors versus this sort of umbrella topic. Because you can incorporate them in there, and it's sort of like a funnel. But I don't know. Those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, and another, sort of way that we could kind of get at that comparison is having, generally the content being the same between the two versions, but one of them specifically being more broad and one of them specifically targeting translating it into a targeted behavior of interest. Because it was interesting, the ecological message that we had, it was very broad. So it was like 60% of nutrient pollution comes from our yards and our roadways. And that was it. So it was just nutrient pollution. It's all of the things. And then the other messages were all targeted at debris and grass clippings. And when it came to people, their fertilizer knowledge, it was interesting that uh, fertilizer knowledge increased more so in the broad message rather than the debris message. And maybe that's because they see debris and that's all they focus on. They don't scale up in their thinking, whereas if you leave it broad, it forces them to think about, oh, okay, so what's in a yard? It's fertilizer, it's grass, it's pesticides. And so that, I hesitate to say it's evidence, but I think it's slight evidence that keeping something more broad could help, people make the connections. So you don't have to say you should do this and you should do that and you should do that and you should do that. And maybe, if you get too targeted, right, you should do this, and that's all I'm going to tell you, then people just kind of focus on that and it doesn't, sort of expand their knowledge base. So that is another thing that we could do here to compare, engagement with those two types of approaches. Any other thoughts folks have? Joey, Ryan, any thoughts from Pinellas County's perspective?
Hey Blake, sorry, I was just trying to figure out how to unmute.
No worries.
No, I was thinking back in 2017, 2018, I know that it was brought up in a TBRPC meeting that only rain down the drain sounded confusing. And they had challenged the municipalities during that meeting to come up with different slogans. I know we had come up with "Don't Feed the Beast" as a result of that and a result of other things. And it's good to see the analysis of the slogan and how it compares with "Only Rain Down the Drain," and to see that it holds up pretty well, I think, from the data that you've supplied. But I do know that there will be confusion in any slogan that's developed as far as, I mean, like I said, when we developed that when it was thought that "Only Rain Down the Drain" was confusing. And we haven't given up on "Only Rain Down the Drain." It's on all of our street markers and everything like that. But it's good to see how it compared, but I agree with Alana. I would like to see, other slogans that other municipalities use get, analyzed in the same way that this was, just to see how effective other slogans are.
Yeah, and we can definitely do that. We can always think about keep going back to the, FDOT RPC stormwater grant to continue like looking at different slogans that are used throughout the watershed to keep sort of doing these analyses. But yeah, just in terms of those slogans, we've got, sort of more creative things like "Don't Feed the Beast." Again, not entirely sure how clear it is to most folks about that. We'll figure that more out as we get into the qualitative stuff. But in terms of the slogans that we have on here or other ones that you guys may be using in your various, agencies, organizations, is there any additional slogans here that really jump out to you that you think this would be really interesting? We like this one. We might adopt this one, want to adopt this in the future, so we'd like to test it out here. Anybody have strong feelings about any of these alternative slogans?
I know "Scoop the Poop" is widely used throughout the Bay Area and throughout the United States. I mean, that would be a good one to throw out there.
Yeah. Any other?
Blake, I can tell you, this is Heather with Tampa again. I can tell you that when I did the May 7th event and used these materials, I had them all on a table. And the stormwater versus storm surge got a lot of attention. That was something that was new that people hadn't seen before. And so that was helpful that day. They were eye-catching. People did come to the table. I had them in these 8.5 by 11 translucent holdups, so you could see them all across the table that day. And that one did get a lot of attention. That topic.
Yeah, and that was one that came out from our focus groups as well. We had one of our someone who actually had a graduate degree confusing stormwater with storm surge. And I was talking to some of my staff about that, and they were very surprised too. They were like, people don't know the difference between that. But yeah, so that's good. Yeah, that's good to know, especially now because storm surge is becoming, has been such front of the headlines kind of thing with the storms last year. That could be an option as well. Any other final thoughts? I see Jonah, you just joined us. We're just doing a final uh sort of think propositions about any sort of slogans, messages, topics, behaviors, etc., that folks might be interested in for testing out in our mailers to the public. I think we might have gotten ideas from everyone. If you had any final ones to contribute, not to put you on the spot.
No, not offhand. Yeah, sorry, I had to jump out to another meeting, but I made it back in.
No worries.
Hey Blake, the only thing I'll add that if you do decide to show the impacts on one of the messaging materials, I think I'd get a little bit more specific, something more relatable than just the nutrient pollution, because I think most people don't know why nutrient pollution matters. But if you connect it to like the manatees or seagrasses or something else, then I think that will be a lot more salient to them. So I just wouldn't be. I mean, nutrient pollution makes a lot of sense to us, but I don't think it's your average person.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Red tide, I think most people know what red tide is, and obviously they want to avoid that. So that's probably a good impact to point out, or like fish kills and algae. But I think the manatees people really relate to the manatees.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Blake.
Yeah.
One thing I was wondering is, do you have any data on, like, if there's something that says, go to this link to find out more information on how to do this properly or something like that, how many people would actually do that? Is it worth our time?
We don't have any data on it. We did have sort of those kind of indicators, like their willingness to sign the stormwater pledge and their willingness to do the recommendations. But because the survey, if we had them actually click on a link to go externally and sign a stormwater pledge, it would not register as them completing the survey. So we couldn't actually test that in the survey, but we will be able to test it in this so that, it'll have a website, it'll have a QR code. And so these will be unique pages that are not discoverable on the internet unless you type in the website directly or scan the QR code. So we'll know any visitors that we get are people that came from one of these two, one of the versions of this. So yes, we don't have that data now, but that's the data that we're wanting to get for this one.
Thank you. Great. That sounds great.
Awesome.
Hey, Blake.
Well, I'll go. Yeah.
Sorry, I have one more question. So
Yeah.
can you explain, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but how you've decided that the old residents and new residents, that's what the difference there is, right? With the 5,000, 5,000. And then, so you're going to send it to what, 20,000 people total, right? And
Yes.
so how did you decide those areas? Because it does seem like there's a difference between age and, degree and gender for some of these. And so I'm just wondering, are you making sure to get like an equal representation of those across all of these, or are you targeting certain like watersheds?
So it'll be random. We'll go through, and so we're going to be purchasing a new resident homeowner list. And so a bunch of companies have those types of things, and they're relatively cheap. So we'll be able to identify addresses of people. It depends how we want to define new residents. That is probably also up to interpretation, but kind of 1 to 2 years, at least, at least less than 2 years. But so in terms of where we do them, we might just look at key areas. We haven't really decided exactly if we just want to make it completely random throughout, our 3 counties of interest, or if we actually want to, maybe now we can sort of think about separating, sort of Gen Z from seniors, if we want to do that. So we can use like census information to help us target some of those. But yeah, we haven't really thought about spatial sort of targeting or things like that at the moment. Do you have any ideas or recommendations for that, or things that you'd like personally think would be interesting?
No, well, I guess, I would just try and target different neighborhoods because I know there's some that obviously have, younger homeowners versus some areas that are, or maybe HOAs that attract, older residents. And I don't know, there's probably some neighborhoods that you're likely not going to see as many like higher, degrees versus, just maybe like high school education. And so I guess I would just try and do like a sampling of all of them if you can, if that's possible. Just because if you, let's say you only targeted HOAs, then that's going to be a crowd that you might not capture if you went out to some of maybe some more underserved neighborhoods too, right?
Yeah. Definitely, yeah. The idea was to try to get it to be as representative as possible, and so that's where kind of the randomization would come in. But yeah, so that's generally sort of the plan, is as representative demographically as possible.
And for the people who answered that they're not interested in doing the survey or applying fertilizer correctly, is there an opportunity for them to follow up and say why they aren't interested?
There wasn't in the survey. There could be though on this website. So whenever we create their websites, we can give some have some like little feedback forms or things like that. But so yeah, we can try to also tease apart why people are coming to the website, the resources that they download, and sort of things like that. Yeah, so we don't really have the why yet, but we could try to think of ways to incorporate that why question into this going forward.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to hear people's reasons.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, so I'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Thanks to everyone for joining. For those of you who couldn't make it today and are watching asynchronously, Thanks for watching. If any thoughts or ideas come to you over the next couple of weeks, please send me an email. Let me know. I'll send you all a link to this recording. I'll also send you a link to the presentation on a Google Drive so you can look at it anytime if you want and see more of those results. Otherwise, I'll be getting back to you guys probably in July with copies of the materials that we create, and so you can give me feedback before we launch it out. But yeah, otherwise, thank you all very much for joining today, sharing your thoughts and ideas. Hopefully this information is useful to you, and we'll continue to have some very interesting results from this final output. So thank you all again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Blake.